One lesson that I have really internalized through all of these different positions is that great ideas come from everywhere. And I think earlier on in my career, I felt more pressure to generate ideas that would shape our program or shape our events and take that weight on myself. And something that I've learned and that I continue to learn and have to be sometimes reminded of and lean into is the power of your network.
Welcome to another episode of Production Value Matters, the Business Events Podcast. Today, I'm really thrilled to welcome Brett Hendrie, the Director of Strategic Events at the Rotman School of Management at the University of Toronto. With over 20 years' experience, Brett has honed his expertise in driving innovation and strategic event planning that engages and educates diverse audiences. At Rotman, he leads the school's thought leadership events portfolio, bringing cutting-edge management thinking and business insights to a global audience. Before his current role, Brett has a transformative tenure at Hot Docs, North America's largest documentary film festival, where he served as executive director. During his time there, he forged significant partnerships with major organizations like Netflix, the Canadian Broadcast Corporation, and significantly expanding the festival's reach and impact within the film and media industries. Brett, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. How are you?
I'm well. Pleasure to be here, Matthew. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. So to begin today's conversation, let's take a moment to reflect on your impressive career in event marketing. Could you start by telling us about what initially drew you to the world of events and how your past experiences shaped your approach?
Happy to, and thank you for the question. It's been a surprising and not always a direct line in my career, but I was always attracted to storytelling and communal experiences, first and foremost through film, which is what I studied in university, and that led to a great opportunity working initially at the Toronto International Film Festival, which was an amazing place to cut your teeth in the events world. The Toronto Film Festival is the world's largest public film festival, and it's a great environment because it's a place where both content producers and content consumers, or in other words, film audiences, really have a symbiotic relationship. And at TIFF, I worked on the industry side, working with producers and distributors who are working at the festival. And that was a great place just to see how they interacted with audiences and how they networked and did business together. And my time at TIFF led to Hot Docs, which at the time was a very small documentary film festival here in Toronto. And then with my colleagues over the next 20 years, we focused on really growing the scope and impact of that organization, which again is focused on bringing independent film to audiences, but also producing conference and market events for the documentary film community. And so we were able to grow that to events that reached over 500,000 people annually and generated more than $100 million in investment into the hands of documentary filmmakers. And one of the things that was really great about my experience at Hot Docs was being able to work with so many diverse partners, whether it was corporate or government or artists and filmmakers, and finding ways that the organization could advance their goals. And as Hot Docs grew, we diversified our programming into more thought leadership and education areas. And that led to my role here at the Rotman School, which, as you mentioned, is the business school here at the University of Toronto. It's Canada's leading business school. And my work here is really focused on knowledge mobilization and how do we bring great thinking and questions and dialogue about business and society to wide audiences. So we, of course, welcome students, staff, alumni, faculty to our events, but our target audience is actually much wider and external to the school. And we reach them through year-round programming of speaker series or conference events, debates, film screenings, and we do that in-person, virtual, and hybrid formats. So it's been a very enjoyable journey. When I started in film, I didn't think I would end up at a business school, but I think the through line has been that I've been drawn to, curating and producing and promoting events for people who are intellectually curious and want to be engaged with great topics and creativity and be inspired to think about the world in new ways.
Absolutely. So what were some of the early lessons you learned and that still influence how you plan and execute events? I mean, you had mentioned that, I started out in film and you were a little surprised that you're now working for a business school, but was there some kind of pivotal moment or project that really defined that path?
Well, I think, one lesson that I have really internalized through all of these different positions is that great ideas come from everywhere. And I think earlier on in my career, I felt more pressure to generate ideas that would shape our program or shape our events and take that weight on myself. And something that I've learned and that I continue to learn and have to be sometimes reminded of and lean into is the power of your network and to really make sure that you're accessible to your community and to your stakeholders and that they can come to you with their ideas. And so, whether you're at a film festival and you're creating films or you're at a business school and you're selecting speakers or topics to explore, you want to make sure that people know you have an open door and can come to you with ideas. Now, we get pitched ideas from executives and companies and publicists all the time. And generally, I found that we actually have many more great ideas incoming than we have space in our program for. So it's about fostering and maintaining those relationships so you know that they're valued and appreciated and that you can, find a time to work with them in the future. One of the rules that a colleague of mine observed during my hot dog stays was also, we called it the rule of thirds, which was that, a third of our good ideas were things that we, locked ourselves in a room and did some brainstorming and came up with a great idea that worked by ourselves. And then a third of ideas were things that we saw somewhere else and we were inspired by and we, borrowed or built on what we saw elsewhere. And then the final third were things that we did by accident because we were intending to do something else. And the result was something that was different but positive in a way that we didn't anticipate. So I think those two lessons about keeping your network alive and vibrant for good ideas and also being open to experimentation in ways that might have unexpected outcomes have been things that have really grown throughout my career.
Yeah, I love that play on the rule of thirds, which is a a framing balance rule that we use in film. So kudos to you for that. So what do you think is foundational as a strategy for and critical when developing content that engages and educates diverse audiences?
Well, I think first and foremost, I've always tried to have a audience-centric approach, which I think will be something that a lot of event producers will instinctively say, but it's harder than it seems because generally you have an agenda, whether that is promotional or revenue based or partnership based, and you're thinking about how you can squeeze all of those different considerations that you have, whether it's those considerations or KPIs into your event programming. But more often than not, if not always, I find that for the event to be a success, it has to work for the audience. And so you have to be able to develop a promise or an implied value proposition to the audience in terms of what they'll get out of the event, and then be able to deliver on that and hopefully exceed their expectations. And so if you're ever developing things and your priorities are not subservient to the audiences, chances are it won't perform as terrifically as you might hoped. And so that means you really need to be in touch with who your audience is and what they're looking for. And that's, I think, sometimes easier said than done. I think it takes a lot of discipline to not substitute your own interests or tastes or priorities for the audiences. But if you keep them top of mind, generally it will lead to success if you can figure out how to unlock what they're looking for.
So, how important do you think audience segmentation is in creating effective event content? And I'm going to put that in the context of in developing and knowing our audiences, we do need to segment them a little bit because not everybody is homogenous, right? And previously on the podcast, we talked about in one of our panels, we were talking about survivor bias in our audiences, right? We see the same faces, the same tiers of people and job descriptions and job functions coming into events, especially in the business sector. And so how do you fight that sort of survivor bias? Like, and I'll give an obtuse example of, if we're doing something for the C-suite and we're doing something for an industry and we constantly see the C-suite coming in and we reinforce ourselves with the idea that, we do a post-event survey, we curate content for that. And then we sort of say, well, how come we're not getting middle management? How come we're not getting, bottom up, middle out kind of content? Does segmentation help you with that? And what is your sort of content strategy around that?
Well, audience segmentation obviously is so important. And in the roles I have now and I've had previously, we really want to maximize reach and audience. And so to do that, you need to make sure that you're speaking to the specific interests of specific groups. And when we talk about it here at Rotman within my events team, we talk about it as going wide or going deep. And so we like to go deep if we can come up with a topic or a subject area or a speaker set that is going to provide a level of expertise and insight in a particular subject area that is really going to stand out from other events that are happening. So an example of that would be we recently hosted a debate format event about whether it's a responsible solution to climate change to use carbon capture technology. Now, our mandate is to have a general business audience, but this is a very niche subject area. And but we had a standing room only crowd for that event because we had top shelf experts going into a very niche subject area and were providing great perspectives on insights on this hot topic within that space. What was surprising and gratifying though is that in addition to all of the sustainability and green tech folks who came out for that event, we actually also welcomed a fair number of people outside of the sector who were just interested in it from a lifelong learning perspective and had read about it in the news and wanted to hear differing points of view on that topic. So that was an example of going deep with with an audience segmentation strategy and really maximizing our audience. At the same time, I'll say there are times where going wide is really beneficial for us. And so if we are looking to just build general awareness or increase media profile or spark introductory interest, having speakers or topics who appeal more widely is really beneficial as well. So if we would have a major keynote speaker with somebody like Malcolm Gladwell or Fareed Zakaria, who have great intellectual rigor and depth, but who are talking about areas, whether it's strategy or leadership or culture that apply across segments and across levels of seniority, that can be really great too in terms of building our audience and the scope of our connection with them.
So I want to go into your experience with partnerships, including organizations like Netflix and CBC. What do you consider when selecting and fostering partnerships for events, particularly when the goal is to expand reach or enhance content quality?
This is another lesson that I've really internalized and has become more and more important to me through my career is just how essential it is to have great partners to work with and understanding how you can build your relationships with them. And as you mentioned, I've had the privilege of working with great partners like CBC and Netflix and others like Apple and Samsung and Scotiabank. I think first and foremost, you need to have shared values and objectives. And so you need to make sure that you're rowing in the same direction and that you're on the same page in terms of what success looks like for you as the primary event organizer and also for your partner. And whether they're a co-presenter or a sponsor or you have some other partnership with them, you really need to make sure that you're bringing everything that you have to make it successful in a way that works for you and that works for them, and most importantly, works for the audience that you're trying to reach. I think that the second thing that I've learned is that it's great to have partners that have complementary audiences and channels. So if you think about your event as just being a way for your partner to reach an audience, especially so in, say, a sponsorship situation, it's much more liberating to actually think about how that partner can bring their customers or their community or their stakeholders to your event. And so the great partnerships have a Venn diagram where there's some overlap, but there is shared interest in bringing both communities together. And those have been some of the most successful partnerships. The third thing I'll mention is the question when evaluating a potential partnership, how willing is the partner for innovation? And are they willing to try new things? So, for example, when we worked with Netflix at Hot Docs, they were focused on building their relationships with the Canadian filmmaking community. And so instead of a traditional sponsorship that might just have trailer presence in front of films and logo and branding recognition, we developed an initiative that we called the Canadian Storytellers Project. And they helped underwrite programming that provided mentorship and training and actually funds to help produce new documentary films to emerging Canadian filmmakers. And so it really integrated them authentically with everything that we were trying to accomplish in terms of our mission to serve filmmakers and really help them build their connections within the Canadian documentary filmmaking community. And you had mentioned CBC. That was a really great partnership that we had with them at Hot Docs. And they were very interested in making sure that they were seen as the home for documentary film. And so we always had different approaches that we were trying. But they were a great partner, for example, when COVID hit, which came a month before the festival. We, of course, like many organizations, pivoted and brought the film festival online, but we were able to work with CBC very quickly to mobilize having premieres of a lot of the films that were set to screen in cinema at the festival on their national network. And so, every week for a month, we had Hot Docs Night on CBC. And, during the period of the lockdown, that was an amazing way to reach a scale of audience that we never really normally reach during the festival. And in both of those cases, those were partners who were willing to experiment and try new approaches and collaborate with us to an output that really spoke to our mission and to their mission as well.
So I'm going to use that particular example as a segue into talking about what technology you think is sort of shaping the future of that content at events. In the pandemic, as you said, you were, I'm assuming, leveraging CBC's technological prowess to be able to reach those audiences. So what technologies have you found to be most effective in enhancing engagement and delivering compelling content to your audiences? And are you continuing to use some of those technologies?
So here at the Rotman School, we've had a lot of great success with hybrid. And I know that for differing events, it may not be always the ideal solution. But for things like our speaker series, which are 1 hour or 90-minute events, and we run 2 or 3 of those a week, it is a great way for us to reach audiences who would not, under normal circumstances, be in Toronto. And during the pandemic, when we were fully virtual and had no in-person events for a significant period of time, we built a large following outside of Toronto and, in fact, nationally and internationally as well. So we're finding success in a balance of in-person events, but also hybrid events that are bringing our content to global audiences. and that having great hybrid systems and high production values. And I guess as the podcast name says, production value matters. That's important. But it's been super exciting to see engagement from so far beyond Toronto. But you need to marry that with an understanding that there is a specialty to the in-person experience. And so we do prioritize that. And there are elements of the in-person experience that are impossible, I think, to replicate online. But that doesn't mean that the online experience can't be a great format for knowledge mobilization, and for our audience can't be a great way for them to advance lifelong learning.
I was just going to say, could you go into a little bit more of a definition of what you mean by hybrid? Because I think a lot of people, especially in the events industry, and we encountered this right after the pandemic. We thought there were, like, the whole industry thought there was going to be this revolution of content and production, that it would be certainly more virtual than we have seen since 2021, 22. A lot of event organizers struggle with the concept of hybrid. So can you go a little bit into how you guys are perceiving hybrid content, and even into the practical of, like, we're broadcasting it live when we're doing it, or is it about on demand content afterwards? Can you go into a little bit more detail on it?
So I'll preface this by saying that I think for longer events, whether it's a one-day conference or a multi-day conference, hybrid is much trickier, and we've not focused on hybrid in those larger events. But for things like our speaker series, which are, as I said, 60 to 90-minute events, multiple times per week, we're focused on how can we take that and turn it into a broadcast where the key learnings and lessons from the speaker are communicated effectively online, just as they would be in person. And that we have opportunities for interactivity, not just with the in-person audience, but online as well. So, whether it's polling with the audience or Q&A, we have a system where the online experience attendees are able to feed into those Q&As and into those polls the same way as the people in the room. And for the most part, for people, if you are in Vancouver or London and you want to watch this content, it's a very satisfying experience, especially if it is on a topic that you're interested in. The other part of the hybrid that's been important, and you alluded to this, is the option for asynchronicity. So most of our events happen at a time of day that is not useful for people in Europe. But if you sign up for our events, you have 30-day replay access to that content. And that has been a real game changer for us as well. So we do have the live stream happening during the event itself, but anybody who signed up either in person or for the hybrid experience can access it for 30 days. And so if you're in a different time zone, or even if you're in the same time zone and the timing doesn't work for you, we find that people normally within 10 to 14 days do view that content. And that's been also a real game changer in terms of making sure that people who want to access it have the option to.
Absolutely. And so can you go into some of the hurdles you may have encountered during during that process, and how you've successfully addressed them?
Well, I think, as with a lot of other organizations, finding the right platform that works for us and for our events was a evolving challenge that we worked through. And ultimately, one of the things that we realized is that sometimes simpler is better. And having something where we could brand it and really own the interface in a way that is true to the Rotman branding was extremely important. And because we were dealing with such a high volume of people, we wanted something that was light touch in terms of them being able to access it from a technological perspective. So we moved through different solutions and have something that is sort of semi-custom built for us that has been successful. The other thing that I think has been important is working with our speakers and our moderators so that they appreciate and understand and include the online audience as well. That's as simple as making sure that they're taking questions from online participants, but also making sure they're welcoming them and addressing them and thinking about how their presentation is being uh, received by people in other parts of the country and other parts of the world. So that's been important as well.
Based on your what you're seeing now and your professional insight, what emerging trends do you anticipate will define the future of event content in the next in the next year, in the next 5 years?
That's a great question. I think, I mean, one of the things that I talked about earlier was making sure that you're always connected to what your audience is interested in. And I think that will evolve over the next few years. One of the things that we've started doing here on the events team at Rotman has been using AI for sentiment analysis within our audience surveys. Me personally, I've always put much more weight into the qualitative feedback from surveys, and I love reading through all of the comments because my feeling is that generally attendees have one or two, maybe three key things that they want to share in terms of what worked for them or what can be improved. And so we rely on that for having great feedback. But AI has been a great tool for us to, synthesize tens of thousands of attendees and understanding what their interests are. So I'm sure things will continue to evolve in terms of what people are interested in from a subject matter point of view, but having technology that allows us to evaluate and understand and quickly respond to what our audience is looking for is really an exciting new area.
Is there any specific tool or resource that you rely on to keep pace with industry trend, audience trends, industry trends, and evolving content?
Well, I try to be a consumer as well as a producer of content. So I'm subscribed to an unruly number of event producers, whether it's Bloomberg or Financial Times or the Globe and Mail or other leading universities and business schools that have great thought leadership platforms. And so I find that a lot of these events and programs are in dialogue with each other and making sure that you're staying on top of where the conversation is at within the business community and just within general audiences who are looking for ways to be intellectually stimulated is hugely important. And so that's my way of kind of watching what's happening. And I try and make it a habit of tuning in to at least a handful of events per week for things that are online or hybrid, and then making my way to events in person whenever I can.
That's great that you're sort of living the personification of what I think a lot of people in the industry instinctually know about using virtual and hybrid as an overall strategy. That, I mean, you're living it, as you said, that you'll go and watch it virtually in a hybrid fashion and then make a decision to go. And I think that's a trend that we're seeing across audiences everywhere. That if hybrid and virtual isn't part of an overall strategy, that you may be falling a bit behind. So finally, I just want to ask you, what advice would you give to an emerging professional in the event industry looking to develop more of a strategic approach to event content?
I think as a piece of advice, I would suggest to people to really be a consumer of the events and great knowledge mobilization that is out there. There's so many organizations that are producing content that is readily accessible, and so much of it is on areas that I think are useful within the event space. It's about strategy, it's about leadership, it's about culture, it's about community. And you can learn about all of those things and also pay attention to how those events are being put together. Ask questions. What is the financial model? What is the marketing model? How is audience being built for these events? How are they growing over time? And I would say try and reach out and build your network. And, the opportunity for people to meet with you is probably greater than you think. And generally, I found that when you knock on someone's door and say, I'd like to have 15 minutes of your time or 20 minutes of your time to ask about your career and what's worked for you, most people are pretty receptive to you. And that's a great way to learn from their own journey, and to also build those connections that you might be able to call upon in the future, and to not be shy about making that outreach.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That was the biggest career advice that I got very early in my career was nobody would balk at telling you what they think about their career, the industry, and talking about themselves. So use that to your advantage is what my teachers used to say to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Brett, thank you very much for joining us today. If anybody would like to reach out to you, where should they find you?
Best place to find me is at Brett Hendrie on LinkedIn, or you can contact me through the Rotman School of Management's website.
Thank you again for joining me. And a reminder to our listeners, if you're interested in more content like this, previous episodes, or deep dive content that we create after every episode, you can go to productionvaluematters.com and subscribe there. Brett, thank you very much for joining me. It was a pleasure to speak with you.
My pleasure. Thanks again for the invitation, Matthew.
Production Value Matters, the business events podcast, is brought to you by Byrne Production Services. To learn more about Byrne Production Services and how we can achieve your business goals, head over to byrneproductionservices.com. Thanks for listening.